I should have known it the second she slammed the car door without looking back. I stood there in the driveway, keys dangling from my fingers, watching the taillights dissolve into the night like she couldn't leave fast enough. There was no hug, no lingering glance, not even a fake goodbye. She was just gone. Her business trip, she called it, like it was supposed to sound professional, necessary, normal. Except it wasn't normal. Not anymore. Her name is Madison. She used to walk into a room like she owned it, and when she left, it was impossible not to join her. But lately, it was like she forgot I existed unless she needed something, a favor, money, a story to tell her friends about how supportive her husband was. Love wasn't even a currency between us anymore. It was dead. She left that night wearing a dress I'd never seen before, something tight and low and meant for someone who didn't have a husband waiting at home. She tossed a tiny suitcase into the back of a black SUV and peeled out of our street without a second thought. I didn't pace. I didn't pour myself a drink. I didn't sit and sulk. The moment her tires screeched into the distance, I moved fast. I had already made up my mind. There wasn't going to be another sleepless night, no more pretending not to notice the secret smiles at her phone or the way she flinched when I brushed against her by accident. While she thought she was about to have the time of her life on business, I drained every cent from our joint accounts. Every dollar she thought she was going to use on some sleazy weekend getaway was rerouted directly to a private account she didn't even know existed. I blocked her number on my phone like I was locking a door she had no key for. By the time the clock hit midnight, the house was still, heavy with a new kind of silence. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene, the kind where you weren't sure who the real victim was. The next morning, the phone rang, an unknown number. I picked it up without thinking. Before I could say a word, a shrieking voice blasted through the speaker, furious and unhinged. "You selfish bastard." Madison's mother, a woman I barely tolerated on the best days, was on the other end, venom practically dripping from her mouth. "What the hell did you do? She can't even enjoy her trip now. Not she's stranded or she's scared. No, she couldn't enjoy her trip." That told me everything I needed to know. Everything. Madison hadn't packed for a conference. She hadn't left for meetings or deals or clients. She left for pleasure. She left for him. Whoever he was. And somehow her mother knew about it and approved. I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to her mother curse me out like I was the villain, while all I could think about was how deep the betrayal actually ran. It wasn't just Madison. It was her whole rotten bloodline. I didn't say a word. I hung up. I stood in the living room, staring at the empty space where her suitcase had been, feeling a strange kind of clarity settle over me, sharp, cold, liberating. The life I thought I had died the second that SUV disappeared into the night. Good. Let it rot. Because the next moves I had planned would make everything she did look like a playground game. And I wasn't going to play fair anymore. The house didn't feel like mine anymore, but that was fine. I wasn't planning to stay. I grabbed a trash bag and started tearing through the place like a storm. Every reminder of her gone. Clothes, pictures, that stupid scented candle she claimed helped her relax but actually made the living room smell like a cheap motel. Into the bag. I didn't pause to get sentimental. Every second wasted thinking about her was a second she didn't deserve. I found her second phone hidden in the back of her underwear drawer. Yeah, a second phone. Burner style. The kind you get when you don't want anyone tracing your calls. She wasn't even trying to hide it properly anymore. That's the thing about people like her. When they think they've won, they get sloppy. I powered it up. No password. Dumb. Or maybe she thought I was too stupid, too soft to ever check. The second the screen lit up, messages poured in. Pages of them. Different names. Different conversations. Same rotten pattern. But one thread stood out, one name popping up over and over again. Logan. Logan sent her pictures. Hotel room keys. Dinner receipts. Compliments so cheap they made my skin crawl. And she answered every time like she was auditioning for the role of the perfect mistress. Can't wait to see you, baby. I miss the way you make me feel alive. He's so boring. Being with you reminds me who I really am. Boring. That word hit harder than any of the rest. I wasn't angry because she betrayed me physically. No, the real knife was how little she respected me. How small she made me behind my back. There was one message from just a few hours before she left. Madison, finally free for the weekend, love? He's too blind to notice anything. I'm all yours. I closed the phone. I didn't need to read more. It was enough. More than enough. I was never supposed to find this. She was supposed to come back, play the devoted wife, and keep feeding me lies like a trained circus animal. But she underestimated me. The world was tilting, but for the first time in months, I liked the feeling. Like stepping off a sinking ship and realizing you could swim just fine without it. I tossed the second phone into the trash bag with the rest of her junk, tied it up tight, and dragged it all to the curb. Not a minute later, the garbage truck came rumbling down the street, and I watched every piece of our fake little life get crushed into oblivion. I wasn't done, though. I grabbed my laptop and started printing. Bank statements, text transcripts, screenshots. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. She wanted a war? Fine. But I was going to be the one writing the history books. By the time the sun went down, I had a full folder prepared thicker than a murder trial case file. The final blow was still to come. She thought she left me behind in a neat little box. She thought she was 2 steps ahead. She had no idea the ground was already crumbling under her. And the first crack? It would come the moment she tried to come home. When Madison finally called, it wasn't her voice I heard first. It was the blaring tone of desperation. Multiple missed calls lit up the burner phone she thought I didn't know existed. She tried my number, her mother's number, even texted my brother, spinning some sob story about losing her wallet and being stranded. She wasn't stranded. She was exactly where she chose to be. She just hadn't planned for the ground beneath her to collapse mid-vacation. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door without checking the peephole. I didn't have to. I knew it wasn't her. She wouldn't dare show her face yet. It was a courier, sweating under the hot sun, holding an envelope like it was ticking. Delivery for Madison Green, he mumbled, glancing over my shoulder into the hollow house. Perfect, I said, taking it from him. He'll make sure she gets it. Inside the envelope were 2 tickets to a romantic escape weekend in Aspen. First-class airfare, luxury suite, spa treatments. The whole thing was booked under her name and Logan's. They weren't even careful anymore. It wasn't a secret. It was a celebration. She planned their getaway like she was planning her freedom parade. I set the tickets down on the kitchen counter, next to the folder I built like a shrine to her betrayal. She finally managed to get through using a random number. I let it ring twice before answering. You blocked me? She exploded immediately, her voice shrill, tearing through the speaker. You left? I said, voice calm, almost detached. You don't get to complain about the locks changing when you're the one who walked out the door. I needed space, she shouted, her tone swinging between rage and false innocence like a pendulum. You're suffocating. You're so controlling. I almost laughed. Suffocating? Controlling? That's what she told herself to justify the betrayal. That I was the villain and she was the poor, misunderstood saint. Space. I echoed. You didn't book space. You booked a king suite at the Aspen Hilton with Logan. Dead silence. For the first time, she had no immediate lie ready. It lasted less than 3 seconds. You went through my private things. She shrieked. How dare you invade my privacy? Unreal. Even cornered, she tried to flip the script, to make herself the victim and me the monster. You were packing your bags for another man while I was paying the bills, I said, my voice dropping low, controlled. You think you get to whine about privacy now? More silence. I could hear her breathing, rapid and uneven as she scrambled to think of some new excuse. Logan's just a friend, she said finally, her voice suddenly soft, almost rehearsed. You're making this into something it's not. I was lonely. You're always working. I didn't know how to tell you. A friend. A friend who booked a romantic getaway, sent her love notes, and called her baby 50 times in a week. A friend who got her so giddy she started treating our marriage like a prison sentence. You didn't know how to tell me? I repeated, slow and deliberate. Funny. You seem to figure out how to tell Logan everything. She tried again, her voice rising, desperate now. Tyler, listen, it was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. It's not like I cut her off before she could twist the knife further. Stop, I said, voice sharp enough to crack glass. Just stop. There was a beat of dead air. Maybe she thought the conversation was over. Maybe she thought I would give her the tired old second chance. Maybe she thought I was still the man stupid enough to believe her when she smiled and said she loved me. You made your choice, I said. You chose him. You chose this. Live with it. I hung up. The phone immediately started buzzing again, messages pouring in. Apologies. Threats. Begging. Empty promises. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I packed a bag, just one, with the few things that mattered. Important papers, a few clothes, my dog's leash. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to come crawling back, dragging her lies like a filthy wedding dress. I didn't leave her a note. I didn't even leave the keys. I locked the door, slid the keys through the mail slot, and walked away without looking back. Because sometimes the real win isn't shouting louder. It's leaving so quietly they never hear you slam the door behind you. When Madison finally called, it wasn't her voice I heard first. It was the blaring tone of desperation. Multiple missed calls lit up the burner phone she thought I didn't know existed. She tried my number, her mother's number, even texted my brother, spinning some sob story about losing her wallet and being stranded. She wasn't stranded. She was exactly where she chose to be. She just hadn't planned for the ground beneath her to collapse mid-vacation. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door without checking the peephole. I didn't have to. I knew it wasn't her, she wouldn't dare show her face yet. It was a courier, sweating under the hot sun, holding an envelope like it was ticking. Delivery for Madison Green, he mumbled, glancing over my shoulder into the hollow house. Perfect, I said, taking it from him. They'll make sure she gets it. Inside the envelope were 2 tickets to a romantic escape weekend in Aspen. First-class airfare. Luxury suite. Spa treatments. The whole thing was booked under her name and Logan's. They weren't even careful anymore. It wasn't a secret. It was a celebration. She planned their getaway like she was planning her freedom parade. I set the tickets down on the kitchen counter next to the folder I built like a shrine to her betrayal. She finally managed to get through using a random number. I let it ring twice before answering. You blocked me? She exploded immediately, her voice shrill, tearing through the speaker. You left, I said, voice calm, almost detached. You don't get to complain about the locks changing when you're the one who walked out the door. I needed space. She shouted, her tone swinging between rage and false innocence like a pendulum. You're suffocating. You're so controlling. I almost laughed. Suffocating? Controlling? That's what she told herself to justify the betrayal. That I was the villain and she was the poor, misunderstood saint. Space. I echoed. You didn't book space. You booked a king suite at the Aspen Hilton with Logan. Dead silence. For the first time, she had no immediate lie ready. It lasted less than 3 seconds. You went through my private things. She shrieked. How dare you invade my privacy? Unreal. Even cornered, she tried to flip the script, to make herself the victim and me the monster. You were packing your bags for another man while I was paying the bills. I said, my voice dropping low. Controlled. You think you get to whine about privacy now? More silence. I could hear her breathing, rapid and uneven, as she scrambled to think of some new excuse. Logan's just a friend, she said finally, her voice suddenly soft, almost rehearsed. You're making this into something it's not. I was lonely. You're always working. I didn't know how to tell you. A friend. A friend who booked a romantic getaway, sent her love notes, and called her baby 50 times in a week. A friend who got her so giddy she started treating our marriage like a prison sentence. You didn't know how to tell me? I repeated, slow and deliberate. Funny. You seem to figure out how to tell Logan everything. She tried again, her voice rising, desperate now. Tyler, listen, it was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. It's not like I cut her off before she could twist the knife further. Stop, I said, voice sharp enough to crack glass. Just stop. There was a beat of dead air. Maybe she thought the conversation was over. Maybe she thought I would give her the tired old second chance. Maybe she thought I was still the man stupid enough to believe her when she smiled and said she loved me. You made your choice, I said. You chose him. You chose this. Live with it. I hung up. The phone immediately started buzzing again, messages pouring in. Apologies. Threats. Begging. Empty promises. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I packed a bag, just one, with the few things that mattered. Important papers, a few clothes, my dog's leash. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for her to come crawling back, dragging her lies like a filthy wedding dress. I didn't leave her a note. I didn't even leave the keys. I locked the door, slid the keys through the mail slot, and walked away without looking back. Because sometimes the real win isn't shouting louder. It's leaving so quietly they never hear you slam the door behind you. The motel I checked into smelled like bleach and old cigarette smoke. Perfect. It was the opposite of the polished, fake life Madison had spent years building, sterile, ugly, real. I didn't need five-star accommodations. I needed space to breathe, to think. The air inside that house had been poisoned for a long time. I just hadn't realized it until now. I dropped my bag on the creaky bed and powered up my laptop. If Madison thought she could wiggle her way back into her old life once her weekend romance imploded, she was going to be in for a surprise she couldn't sweet-talk her way out of. I opened the folder labeled Final. Inside were copies of everything. Screenshots of every message. Printouts of the flight bookings under Logan's name and hers. Hotel confirmation emails. Her credit card charges for gifts I never received. And the real prize, the joint bank account withdrawals I made right before she skipped town. Every penny gone. Legally mine, too. Thanks to a prenuptial agreement she once bragged she never bothered reading because we're forever, babe. It was almost funny how easy it was. While Madison was still somewhere between cocktails and hotel sheets, I emailed every file to a private lawyer I'd hired within hours of her leaving. Not just for divorce. For full financial and legal separation. No spousal support. No settlements. Nothing. She wasn't going to bleed me dry to fund her next affair. By the time sunset stretched long bloody lines across the cracked motel walls, my phone started buzzing again. It was her. Again. This time she didn't call. She sent a voice message. I listened, letting the venom sink into my bloodstream so I'd never forget how it felt. I can't believe you're doing this. Her voice was shaking with rage. After everything I gave up for you. After wasting the best years of my life being your wife. You're ruining everything over one little mistake. Grow up, Tyler. One little mistake. She couldn't even say his name. I stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling something inside me settle. Not anger, not sadness. Something sharper, cleaner, permanent shift. Madison wasn't calling because she missed me. She was calling because she missed what I provided, the stability, the name, the protection. Without me, she was just another pretty face aging out of the spotlight she built on lies. She didn't love me. She loved the version of herself she could be when she was married to a man like me. And now she was watching that version evaporate. I didn't answer. Instead, I sent one message. Just one. See you in court. No threats. No explanations. Just the future she had signed up for the moment she chose another man over the life we built. Not 2 minutes later, she sent another message, longer, dripping with fake sadness, the kind only people like her could manufacture on demand. I made a mistake. I was scared. I love you, Tyler. You're my home. Home. A word she tore apart the second she climbed into someone else's bed. I turned off the phone and dropped it onto the nightstand. Outside, the motel parking lot buzzed under a flickering neon sign. Somewhere out there, Madison was still spinning her webs, still lying to herself, still believing she could charm her way out of the hell she created. Let her. I wasn't hers to manipulate anymore. I was already gone, not just from the house, not just from her, but from the very life where she thought she owned me. And when she realized it, when the last illusion shattered, that was a moment I didn't want to miss. I had one final card to play, and it was already in motion. 2 days passed. Long enough for the silence to start squeezing her. Long enough for the reality to crack whatever fantasy she and Logan had built during their stolen nights. Madison's texts started to change from furious to frantic. 1 minute she was cursing me out like I was a stranger who wronged her. The next, she was sending pathetic, syrupy lines about missing my arms around her, about being confused and making mistakes we could fix together. I didn't reply. I wanted her to feel every inch of that distance she created. I wanted her to sit in the mess without me running in to clean it up like she expected. I spent those days working quietly with my lawyer. I wasn't just preparing to leave her. I was preparing to erase her from my life in a way so absolute it would feel like she never existed. I moved the rest of my personal accounts out of reach. I shifted utilities out of my name. I changed the locks at the house. A house she wasn't going to see the inside of again unless it was through pictures attached to court papers. On the third day, around dusk, I was sitting outside the motel, sipping coffee that tasted like dirt, when a familiar car turned into the lot. Madison's car. She hadn't called this time. She hadn't texted. She just showed up, like a bomb ticking its way toward detonation. I didn't move. I didn't hide. I wanted her to see me. Wanted her to feel the weight of what she lost. Standing there in the crumbling light, wearing yesterday's makeup and desperation like a second skin. She got out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the rusted siding of the building. She walked straight toward me, heels stabbing at the cracked asphalt, face twisted into a perfect storm of rage and desperation. "Tyler," she started, voice cracking as she stopped a few feet away. "This is insane. You can't just run away. You can't just leave like this." I said nothing. Let her fill the empty air with her own madness. "I made a mistake," she shouted, loud enough that a guy 3 doors down poked his head out, saw the scene, and quickly ducked back inside. Madison didn't care. She was unraveling right there in the parking lot. "You're my husband. We're supposed to fight for this," she yelled, her voice pitching higher. "You're supposed to fight for me." Finally, I stood up, slow, deliberate. She took a step back without realizing it. "Good." I looked her dead in the eye and spoke the truth that had been burning a hole through my chest for months. "You didn't want a husband, Madison. You wanted a hostage." Her mouth opened like she was going to fire back something sharp, something rehearsed. But the words caught somewhere in her throat and died. She wasn't prepared for this version of me, the one who didn't beg, didn't plead, didn't crumble at her feet. I stepped closer, close enough that she could see it in my eyes, the finality. "I am not fighting to stay trapped with someone who treated me like an accessory," I said, voice low and even. "You killed us the minute you decided I wasn't enough." Her lip trembled, for real this time, not the dramatics she was so good at pulling for an audience. She looked at me like she was seeing a ghost, a man she used to know but couldn't reach anymore. "Tyler, please," she whispered, reaching out, fingertips brushing the air between us like she could still close the distance. I stepped back. "No," I said. "You don't get to ask for anything now." She stood there, shivering despite the heat, surrounded by everything she chose and everything she destroyed. I turned and walked past her, not looking back, not slowing down. Every step away from her felt lighter. Every second felt cleaner. Every breath felt like freedom I hadn't tasted in years. As I reached my car, I heard her behind me, a choked sob, raw and broken. For a second, just one, the old version of me, the idiot who once loved her blindly, almost faltered. Almost. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and drove off without once glancing in the rearview mirror. Madison had made her bed. Now she could rot in it. Alone. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I drove aimlessly for hours, nowhere in particular, just letting the air rip through the open windows while the city blurred past. It felt good not being anchored to her. No texts to reply to. No fake smiles to maintain. No walking on glass. Eventually, I parked near the beach, left the engine running, and sat in silence while waves pounded the shore like a metronome marking the end of a life I no longer owed anything to. The next morning, her lawyer called. A woman with a voice like cold coffee and expensive perfume. She introduced herself politely, too politely. It was the kind of voice that dressed a knife in silk. "Mr. Green, I represent Madison Green. She's asked me to reach out regarding a potential discussion of reconciliation terms. She's hoping to come to a more mutually beneficial resolution before things escalate." I didn't respond right away. I just sat there, smiling into the silence. The arrogance. The unshakable belief that this was just another negotiation. That all she needed was a suit with a polished voice to talk me down like I was some angry client with a temporary complaint. "I'll make this simple," I said, my voice low, calm. "There's nothing to resolve. She cheated. She lied. She threw a grenade into our marriage and thought I'd be the one left crawling through the smoke." A beat. Silence. Then the lawyer cleared her throat. "Mr. Green, I understand your frustration. But Madison is willing to negotiate. She's deeply regretful." "No, she isn't," I cut in. "She's not regretful. She's cornered. Another pause. The voice softened slightly, adjusting tactics. If we can avoid public escalation, this could still be resolved without media exposure or unnecessary court involvement. So that was the real concern. Not the marriage. Not the betrayal. Optics. Reputation. Control. Madison was trying to get ahead of this before it bled into her social circle, before people started asking where her husband went and why her name was no longer attached to the lifestyle she paraded around so proudly. She thought this was a negotiation. It wasn't. It was a burial. Tell Madison, I said slowly, that she can keep Logan. Keep the tickets. Keep her lies. But she's not keeping my name, my money, or 1 ounce of my silence. Then I hung up. By evening, her social media started shifting fast. Photos vanished. Posts were deleted. Comments turned off. That carefully curated online world she built like a fortress, crumbling. Then came the texts. Long, clumsy paragraphs filled with emotional bait. People are asking questions. My job's on the line. Can we please just talk in private? I never wanted to hurt you. You're making this worse than it has to be. Every word screamed one thing. Control was slipping. She wasn't trying to fix what she broke. She was trying to cover the cracks before anyone else saw them. I ignored them all. The next message came with a picture. A photo of us years ago before everything curdled. She sent it with the caption, "We were happy once." Doesn't that count for something? It did. Counted for the motive. That photo wasn't a memory. It was evidence of how far she had to fall. She was scrambling to repaint our history so she wouldn't have to sit in the ruins of what she chose. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the folder, every receipt, every text, every thread of betrayal, to her lawyer. A quiet message followed. This is the only conversation I'll be having. In court. Let them read it. Let them see what she really was under the makeup and filtered smiles. A day passed. Then 2. And then Madison showed up again. This time she wasn't loud. She wasn't screaming. She was standing on the sidewalk near my brother's house, where she must have guessed I'd be crashing now. Hair tied back, face pale, posture tense like a statue with cracks spreading through it. I walked right past her. She followed, fast. "Tyler, please," she said, grabbing my arm. I turned, looked at her, not through her. For the first time, I could see her without the layers she used to keep me blind. The charm, the fake sincerity, the practiced emotion. They were all gone now. What was left was a woman cornered by her own game. A liar without a script. "You don't get to chase me now," I said. "You had years. You had chances. You cashed them all in for cheap lies and someone else's bed." She blinked hard, jaw twitching, searching for anything she could say to pull me back in. "You're throwing away everything we had," she whispered. I leaned in, voice calm. "No, I'm finally picking it up and burning it." And I walked away. This time, she didn't follow. A week later, it happened. I knew it was coming. People like Madison don't go quietly. When charm and lies stop working, when they realize they've lost control, they reach for the only weapon they have left, chaos. It started small. Little things. I'd hear from mutual friends, the ones she hadn't cut loose yet, dropping vague hints in my inbox. "Hey, man, everything okay between you and Madison? She said you've been unstable?" Unstable. There it was. When you can't deny what you did, you smear the person you wronged. The rumors dripped through our old social circles like a slow, poisonous leak. Madison was worried about me. Madison was concerned for my mental health. Madison was doing everything she could to help. She painted herself like some tragic heroine, wounded but selfless. It made me sick. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to, because I knew something Madison didn't. That same week, my lawyer filed the official divorce papers, and they were public record. Anyone who wanted to know the truth could walk into a courthouse and see exactly why our marriage detonated. Names, dates, evidence, real ugly facts, no hiding. And then came the real storm. Saturday night. Some charity gala, the kind Madison lived for, the ones where she could wear a tight dress and pretend she was royalty for a few hours. She went without me, obviously. She went with Logan. Publicly. Brazenly. There were photos. Not just the posed ones either, the ugly, too-close shots that caught the truth. Her clinging to him like a trophy she was desperate to show off. Him looking uncomfortable, like he realized, far too late, what he'd actually won. The story hit local social media before midnight. Not because people cared about them, but because Madison made them care. And now she couldn't control what they saw. Comments exploded beneath the photos. Wasn't she married like 5 minutes ago? Didn't she always preach about loyalty and family values? Yikes, poor guy she left. It spiraled fast. By morning, Madison's Instagram, the shrine she spent years building, was in lockdown. Comments turned off. Stories deleted. Damage control mode. But it was too late. Her perfect image cracked like a mirror hit with a hammer. And I watched from a distance, sipping black coffee, feeling nothing but a cold, deep satisfaction. Then, around noon, the real message came. A handwritten letter stuffed into the mailbox at my brother's place. No postage. No envelope. Just folded paper crammed in like a desperate last-ditch prayer. I almost didn't read it. A curiosity won. Inside, Madison's handwriting, rushed, messy, bleeding ink. You're destroying me. Please. I made mistakes, but you're turning everyone against me. We had a life. You were supposed to protect me. I still love you. I don't know how to fix this. I need you. There it was. Not apology. Not understanding. Need. She didn't miss me. She missed the shield. The shelter. The version of herself she built standing beside me. And now that it was gone, she was like a child trapped outside in the rain, pounding on a door that would never open again. I folded the letter neatly, dropped it into the trash, and walked away without hesitation. She was right about one thing. She was being destroyed. But I wasn't doing it. She did it herself. I just finally stopped protecting her from the consequences. And if she thought the worst was over, she was about to find out how wrong she was. Because next week we had a court date, and Madison was going to learn that some betrayals don't end in arguments or slamming doors. Some betrayals end in total, irreversible erasure. The courthouse wasn't grand or impressive. It was a squat, ugly building, surrounded by cracked pavement and dying hedges. It looked tired, worn out, perfect. I arrived early, wearing a plain black suit. No family, no friends, no crowd. I didn't need backup. The truth was enough. Madison wasn't early. She was late, of course. Maybe she thought arriving late would make her look important. Maybe she thought it would rattle me, make me second-guess everything I was about to do. Didn't. When she finally showed, the temperature in the lobby seemed to shift. She wore a tight, expensive-looking dress, heels clicking hard against the tile. Her hair was too perfect, her makeup too heavy, layers trying to paint over the cracks. She didn't look confident. She looked like someone clinging to a mask that no longer fit. Logan was with her. That was the funniest part. He hovered awkwardly by her side, wearing a suit he didn't know how to stand in, face pale, hands jammed into his pockets like a kid sent to the principal's office. He wasn't a partner. He was a prop. Madison clutched his arm too tightly, smiling with her teeth but not her eyes, as if dragging him along would somehow lend her credibility. It didn't. She saw me, and for a split second, something flickered in her expression, something raw and ugly. She nodded stiffly. I didn't nod back. When they called us into the courtroom, it was almost silent, just the shuffle of papers, the squeak of cheap shoes on linoleum. No drama. No grand declarations. Just the sterile finality of a wreckage being sorted and filed away. Madison's lawyer tried to fight, tried to spin. They pushed for a settlement, something quiet and fast. They floated the idea that the marriage had broken down mutually, that we should move forward with dignity. But the evidence spoke louder than any polished words. Page after page. Dates. Times. Receipts. Photos. Messages she thought no one would ever see outside of a locked phone screen. It wasn't anger I felt as the judge flipped through them. It was clarity. Like watching a fire burn something to ash, knowing it could never hurt you again. Madison sat there, shrinking by the second. The courtroom lights were cruel, too bright, too honest. They stripped away the glamour she always hid behind. She tried to whisper to her lawyer, tried to smile at the judge, tried to salvage the performance. But there's a difference between losing control and realizing you never had it in the first place. And Madison finally realized it. The judge's voice was firm. Final. The divorce was granted immediately. No spousal support. No claims to shared assets. Full financial separation. Her attempt to claim emotional damages? Laughed out of the room. She got nothing. Exactly what she deserved. When it was over, I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and turned to leave. Madison didn't move. She sat frozen in her chair like she still hadn't processed the reality. Like she was waiting for someone, anyone, to call cut and yell that the scene was over. But there were no retakes. No edits. No fresh starts. This was it. This was all real. As I passed by, she looked up at me, eyes wide, hollow. There were 1,000 things she probably wanted to say. 1,000 desperate, gasping excuses. But I didn't stop. Not for her. Not for the past. Not for the ghost of the man I used to be with her. Outside, the air was sharp and cold. It felt good against my skin, like a baptism after too many years drowning in someone else's lies. Logan stumbled out after me a few minutes later, looking lost, glancing over his shoulder like he wasn't sure whether to stay or run. Let him have her. Let him learn the way I learned. Madison wasn't a prize. She was a storm, and he was standing exactly where the lightning would hit next. I got into my car without a word, without a glance back at the courthouse or the shattered woman inside it. Because I wasn't just leaving Madison behind. I was leaving the version of myself that ever believed in her. And as the engine roared to life, I smiled, not a bitter smile, not a hollow one. A real smile. The kind you only find after crawling out of hell. I thought the courtroom would be the end. I thought that once the papers were signed and the ink was dry, she would finally fade away like smoke after a fire burns itself out. I underestimated how far desperation could drag someone. The first sign came 2 days after the divorce was finalized. A missed call from an unknown number. Then another. Then a flood of voicemails, angry, slurred, some sobbing so loudly it distorted the audio. She wasn't leaving messages because she wanted to fix anything. She was trying to find a crack, any crack, to crawl back through. I ignored it. But Madison wasn't done. That night, my brother's wife called me, voice tight and anxious. She came here, she said. She showed up at the house. She was hysterical. I asked if Madison had said anything specific. My sister-in-law hesitated, then spoke carefully. She said you were violent. That she left you because she was scared. That you threatened her. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the familiar pulse of rage try to rise. It wasn't enough for her to betray me privately. Now she was trying to rewrite the story entirely, paint herself as the victim, me as the monster. It was a smart move in a sick way. She knew sympathy was a powerful drug. She knew that once you plant doubt, it spreads like rot. But what she didn't understand, what she never understood, was that lies built on desperation collapse under their own weight. I immediately called my lawyer, explained everything. He didn't sound surprised. He sounded prepared. Document everything, he said. Every message. Every call. Every interaction. She's panicking. People panic when they realize they've lost their power. I started saving every voicemail, every email, every text. Piece by piece, I built a second folder, thicker, messier, even uglier than the first. Meanwhile, Madison's social media started shifting again. Long, cryptic posts about healing and overcoming trauma. Photos of her with tear-stained eyes, posing with captions about survivors and finding your voice. No names were mentioned. But she didn't need to. The people who wanted to believe her filled in the blanks themselves. I could feel the shift, subtle but real. People started pulling away. Old friends stopped returning texts. Invitations dried up. Conversations grew colder. Madison was setting fires everywhere she could, hoping one would finally catch and burn me down with her. But she made a mistake, the same mistake she always made. She underestimated how much proof I had. She underestimated how tired people were of her games once they saw the strings. Because for every whisper she sent out into the world, I sent something louder and heavier into the hands of my lawyer. Photos, messages, receipts. The reality was brutal, cold, undeniable. It didn't matter what she cried about online. It didn't matter what sad little posts she wrote about finding herself. The truth had already sunk its claws into her story, and it wasn't letting go. A week later, she tried again, this time showing up at my workplace. Middle of the day. Parking lot full of people. She stood there, clutching some papers to her chest, eyes wide and wild. Security stopped her before she could get inside. They called me down to deal with it, and for a moment I almost didn't recognize her. The woman standing there wasn't Madison anymore. It was what was left after the lies ran out. After the mask broke into pieces too small to reassemble. She tried to hand me the papers. Some garbage about reconsidering and mediation. She begged. She cried. And when none of it worked, when she realized I wasn't coming back, her voice turned sharp enough to cut glass. "You're nothing without me," she spat, loud enough for the security guards to hear every word. "You'll always be nothing." I looked at her, really looked, not with hate, not with pity, with the cold clarity of a man who finally saw exactly what he had escaped from. "You were right about one thing," I said quietly. "I'm nothing now." She blinked, confused for a second. "Nothing," I repeated, stepping back, "of yours." I turned without another word, walked back inside, and let security escort her off the property like the trespasser she was. That was the last time I ever saw Madison in person. She had played every card, every cheap trick, every dirty move, and none of it was enough, because at the end of the day, she wasn't fighting for me. She was fighting for the version of herself she lost the second she chose betrayal. And that version, it was already dead. Months passed. Seasons changed. The city moved on without noticing the crater Madison left in her own life. And so did I. There was no dramatic moment where everything healed. No magical sunrise where the pain disappeared. It didn't work like that. The truth was quieter, harder, but real. It started with simple things. The first morning I woke up and didn't immediately think of her. The first time I laughed at a stupid joke without feeling like I was betraying some invisible ghost. The first night I slept through without waking up with a gut full of bitterness. Freedom didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces, small, stubborn victories stacked one on top of another until one day, without realizing it, I had built a new life with my own hands. A life that didn't have Madison's fingerprints all over it. I heard whispers sometimes about her, how Logan left a few months after the court date, quietly, no drama, how she bounced from job to job, city to city, trying to outrun the stain she painted across her own story. She still posted online sometimes, fake smiles, recycled captions about self-growth and new beginnings. But even through the filters and bright lighting, the cracks were obvious. You can't outrun who you are. And Madison was finally learning that lesson the hard way. As for me, I didn't hate her. I didn't miss her. I didn't feel anything toward her at all. And that was the real victory. She could lie. She could smear. She could rewrite history for anyone desperate enough to believe her. But she could never touch me again. I wasn't carrying her anymore. I wasn't carrying her betrayal, her lies, her rot. I dropped all of it the day I walked out of that courthouse without looking back. If there's one thing I learned, something carved so deep into my bones that I'll never forget it, it's this. Love doesn't excuse betrayal. Loyalty doesn't excuse abuse. And sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to walk away from someone you once would have bled for. Not with rage. Not with revenge. With silence. With indifference. With your head held so high that they have to break their neck just to catch a glimpse of what they lost. Madison didn't destroy me. She set me free. And if there's anyone out there reading this, anyone sitting in the quiet, choking on suspicion, doubting your worth because someone you loved made you small, let me be clear. You don't owe your life to someone who spits on your loyalty. You don't owe forgiveness to someone who weaponized your trust. You don't owe second chances to someone who never valued the first. You owe it to yourself to walk. And when you do, when you finally stop carrying them, you'll realize the weight you thought would kill you was never yours to carry at all. It was always theirs.